Question 1. System analysis indicates that the Symantec Data Loss Prevention (DLP) system is experiencing increased alert volume and a noticeable degradation in processing speed, impacting the efficiency of the security operations team. As the administrator responsible for optimizing this system, which of the following approaches would best balance performance improvements with the imperative to maintain robust data protection and regulatory compliance? Option A. Immediately disable a selection of less frequently triggered detection rules across various policy groups to reduce the overall processing load on the DLP servers. Option B. Implement a system-wide policy change to increase the sensitivity of all detection rules by one level to ensure no potential data loss event is missed, regardless of the impact on alert volume or performance. Option C. Conduct a detailed review of high-volume incident types and specific detection rules that are generating a disproportionate number of false positives. Based on this analysis, refine and tune these rules, potentially adjusting sensitivity thresholds or exclusion criteria, and monitor the impact on both alert volume and system performance. Option D. Continue operating the system as is, focusing only on addressing critical system alerts, and defer any performance optimization efforts until a major system upgrade is scheduled. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed review of high-volume incident types and specific detection rules that are generating a disproportionate number of false positives. Based on this analysis, refine and tune these rules, potentially adjusting sensitivity thresholds or exclusion criteria, and monitor the impact on both alert volume and system performance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in Symantec Data Loss Prevention (DLP) administration, optimizing system performance without compromising detection accuracy or regulatory compliance. The administrator must balance resource allocation, policy effectiveness, and the potential for false positives/negatives. The professional challenge lies in making informed decisions that demonstrably improve efficiency while adhering to the strict requirements of data protection regulations, which are paramount. Failure to do so can lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven methodology. This begins with establishing baseline performance metrics and then iteratively tuning policies based on detailed incident analysis, focusing on high-risk data types and channels, and refining detection rules to reduce false positives. Directly addresses process optimization. This aligns with best practices for regulatory compliance by ensuring that sensitive data is adequately protected without creating an unmanageable volume of alerts. The Symantec DLP framework is designed to support such granular tuning, allowing administrators to achieve both efficiency and efficacy. This approach is professionally sound as it is measurable, repeatable, and directly contributes to the organization's security posture and compliance obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling specific detection rules without thorough analysis is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action bypasses the intended protective mechanisms of the DLP system, potentially leaving sensitive data exposed and violating data protection laws. It creates a blind spot in the organization's security, making it vulnerable to data breaches and noncompliance. Implementing broad, system-wide policy changes without prior testing or impact assessment is also professionally unacceptable. Such changes can inadvertently increase false positives, overwhelming the security team and diminishing the effectiveness of the DLP system. This can lead to missed actual incidents and a failure to meet compliance requirements due to an inability to effectively manage alerts. Furthermore, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding the system's behavior and its implications for data protection. Ignoring system performance alerts and continuing with the status quo is a failure to proactively manage the DLP infrastructure. This can lead to system instability, degraded performance, and ultimately, a reduced ability to detect and prevent data loss. It represents a neglect of operational responsibilities and can indirectly lead to compliance issues if the system's effectiveness is compromised. Professional reasoning. Professionals managing Symantec DLP must adopt a proactive and analytical approach. The decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the organization's data protection policies and regulatory obligations. 2. Establishing clear performance metrics and baselines for the DLP system. 3. conducting regular audits and analysis of DLP incidents, focusing on both false positives and false negatives. 4. Implementing changes incrementally and testing their impact on performance and detection accuracy. 5. Documenting all changes and their rationale. 6. Staying informed about Symantec DLP best practices and updates. This structured approach ensures that process optimization efforts are aligned with security objectives and regulatory mandates, fostering a robust and compliant data loss prevention strategy. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that the Symantec data loss prevention 12 detection servers are experiencing high CPU utilization, impacting the overall efficiency of incident detection. Which of the following approaches represents the most effective and compliant method for optimizing detection server performance while maintaining robust data loss prevention capabilities? Option A. Immediately increase the number of concurrent scans across all detection servers to distribute the workload more evenly and reduce individual server strain. Option B. Disable content inspection for less sensitive data types to reduce processing overhead and improve overall server responsiveness. Option C. Continue using the default configuration settings provided by Symantec, as they are designed for optimal performance out of the box. Option D. Systematically adjust detection server configurations, such as the number of concurrent scans and content inspection depth, while closely monitoring performance metrics and detection accuracy to identify optimal settings. The correct answer is D. Systematically adjust detection server configurations, such as the number of concurrent scans and content inspection depth, while closely monitoring performance metrics and detection accuracy to identify optimal settings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in Symantec data loss prevention, DLP, administration, optimizing the performance of detection servers without compromising their ability to enforce data protection policies. The core tension lies between resource utilization and detection efficacy. Overly aggressive tuning can lead to missed incidents, while overly conservative settings can strain infrastructure and impact business operations. The administrator must balance these competing demands, understanding that incorrect decisions can have significant consequences, including regulatory noncompliance, data breaches, and operational disruptions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased, data-driven optimization strategy. This begins with establishing baseline performance metrics and understanding current resource utilization patterns. By systematically adjusting detection server configurations, such as the number of concurrent scans or the depth of content inspection, and then meticulously monitoring the impact on both performance, CPU, memory, network, and detection rates, false positives and false negatives, the administrator can identify optimal settings. This iterative process, guided by Symantec's best practices and an understanding of the specific data types and policies being enforced, ensures that performance gains are achieved without sacrificing the integrity of the DLP solution. This aligns with the principle of maintaining effective data protection controls, a fundamental requirement for regulatory compliance. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to indiscriminately increase the number of concurrent scans across all detection servers without prior analysis. This can lead to resource exhaustion, system instability, and potentially missed detections due to overwhelmed servers. From a regulatory perspective, this failure to maintain effective controls could result in noncompliance with data protection mandates, as the DLP system is no longer reliably preventing data loss. Another incorrect approach is to disable or significantly reduce the depth of content inspection for certain data types to improve performance. While this might offer immediate performance gains, it creates blind spots in the DLP system. If sensitive data is exfiltrated without detection because inspection was too shallow, this constitutes a direct violation of data protection regulations, potentially leading to severe penalties and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on vendor default settings without any performance tuning. While defaults are designed to be broadly applicable, they are rarely optimal for a specific environment. This can lead to inefficient resource utilization and suboptimal detection rates, neither of which represents best practice in managing a critical security control like DLP. It fails to demonstrate due diligence in ensuring the system operates at peak effectiveness. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with DLP administration must adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach to process optimization. This involves 1. Understanding the current state. Establish baseline metrics for both system performance and detection accuracy. 2. Identifying specific optimization goals. Clearly define what constitutes an improvement, e.g., reduced CPU usage by X%, increased detection rate for Y policy. 3. Implementing changes incrementally. Make small, controlled adjustments to configurations. 4. Monitoring and validating. Continuously measure the impact of each change on performance and detection. 5. Documenting all changes and their outcomes. Maintain a clear record for auditing and future reference. 6. Staying informed about vendor best practices and regulatory requirements. Ensure that tuning efforts align with both technical capabilities and compliance obligations. Question 3. Which approach would be most effective for optimizing the performance of a Symantec data loss prevention 12 environment while maintaining robust data protection capabilities? Option A. Increase the overall scan depth and sensitivity for all policies to ensure no data is missed, regardless of potential performance impact. Option B. Broadly disable less critical policies and reduce the frequency of content scans across all endpoints to alleviate system load. Option C. Systematically analyze current policy configurations and scan profiles to identify specific areas of high resource utilization or excessive false positives. Then implement granular adjustments and exclusions based on this data. Option D. Make widespread, unverified configuration changes to various system parameters in an attempt to find a more efficient setup. The correct answer is C. Systematically analyze current policy configurations and scan profiles to identify specific areas of high resource utilization or excessive false positives. Then implement granular adjustments and exclusions based on this data. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because the Symantec Data Loss Prevention (DLP) administrator must balance the need for efficient data monitoring with the potential for performance degradation and the risk of missing critical incidents. The Symantec DLP-12 framework, within its operational context, emphasizes the importance of optimizing processes to ensure effective data protection without compromising system stability or the ability to detect policy violations. Careful judgment is required to select a configuration that maximizes detection accuracy and response timeliness while minimizing resource overhead. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased and data-driven methodology for process optimization. By starting with a baseline, identifying specific bottlenecks through detailed analysis, and then implementing targeted adjustments, the administrator ensures that changes are effective and measurable. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and risk management inherent in DLP administration. The focus on granular policy tuning and exclusion of known false positives directly addresses the core objective of DLP: accurate detection of sensitive data exfiltration. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of unintended consequences, such as increased false positives or missed incidents, and ensures compliance with the implicit regulatory expectation of maintaining a robust and effective data protection posture. An incorrect approach that involves broadly disabling policies or reducing scan frequency is professionally unacceptable. Such actions directly contravene the fundamental purpose of a DLP system, which is to actively monitor and protect sensitive data. Disabling policies, even temporarily, creates significant regulatory and ethical failures by leaving sensitive data unprotected and increasing the risk of data breaches. This could lead to severe penalties under data protection regulations, loss of customer trust, and reputational damage. Reducing scan frequency similarly compromises the system's ability to detect and prevent data loss in near real time, increasing the window of vulnerability. This demonstrates a failure to uphold the duty of care in protecting sensitive information and a disregard for the potential impact of data breaches. Another incorrect approach, such as making widespread, unverified configuration changes without a clear understanding of their impact, is also professionally unsound. This haphazard method increases the likelihood of introducing new performance issues or, more critically, creating blind spots in data monitoring. It bypasses the essential steps of analysis and testing, leading to an unstable and unreliable DLP environment. This lack of systematic approach can result in missed incidents, which is a direct failure in fulfilling the DLP system's mandate, and can have severe regulatory consequences. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the current state. Establish a baseline of system performance and detection rates. 2. Identify specific problems. Use monitoring tools and logs to pinpoint performance bottlenecks or areas with high false positive rates. 3. Formulate hypotheses. Develop specific, testable theories about the root causes of these problems. 4. Implement targeted solutions. Make small, controlled changes based on the hypotheses. 5. Measure the impact. Evaluate the effectiveness of the changes against the established baseline and objectives. 6. Iterate and refine. Continuously monitor and adjust configurations based on ongoing analysis and evolving requirements. This systematic, data-driven approach ensures that process optimization enhances, rather than compromises, the effectiveness and efficiency of the Symantec DLP solution. Question 4. The review process indicates that the Symantec data loss prevention system is generating a high volume of alerts, many of which are identified as false positives, leading to significant strain on the incident response team and potential delays in addressing genuine threats. Which of the following approaches represents the most effective strategy for optimizing the DLP system's performance and ensuring compliance? Option A. Focus exclusively on optimizing the technical parameters of detection rules, such as regular expression patterns, without evaluating or adjusting the associated incident response procedures or the business context of the data being monitored. Option B. Disable or significantly reduce the scope of detection policies that have historically generated a high number of false positives, prioritizing the reduction of alert noise over comprehensive data coverage. Option C. Immediately increase the sensitivity of all detection policies across the board to ensure no potential data exfiltration is missed, regardless of the resulting alert volume. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of incident data and false positive trends to identify specific detection rules and policies that are over-alerting. Based on this analysis, systematically tune these rules by adjusting sensitivity, refining keywords, or implementing more specific content matching criteria, while concurrently reviewing and streamlining incident response workflows for efficiency and clarity. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of incident data and false positive trends to identify specific detection rules and policies that are over-alerting. Based on this analysis, systematically tune these rules by adjusting sensitivity, refining keywords, or implementing more specific content matching criteria, while concurrently reviewing and streamlining incident response workflows for efficiency and clarity. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention, DLP, administration, balancing the need for comprehensive monitoring with the potential for overwhelming false positives and operational inefficiency. The core difficulty lies in optimizing the DLP system's detection rules and incident response workflows to accurately identify genuine data exfiltration risks without creating an unmanageable volume of alerts. This requires a nuanced understanding of the organization's data handling practices, the specific regulatory landscape, and the technical capabilities of the Symantec DLP solution. Failure to optimize can lead to missed critical incidents, wasted resources investigating non-issues, and potential non-compliance with data protection mandates. Correct approach analysis. The most effective approach involves a systematic, data-driven refinement of detection rules and incident response procedures. This begins with analyzing the types and frequency of current incidents, identifying patterns of false positives, and understanding the business context of data flows. Based on this analysis, detection rules can be tuned by adjusting sensitivity levels, refining keywords, or incorporating more sophisticated content analysis techniques. Simultaneously, incident response workflows should be reviewed to ensure they are efficient, clearly defined, and aligned with organizational policies and regulatory requirements. This iterative process of analysis, tuning, and validation ensures that the DLP system becomes more accurate and efficient over time, focusing resources on genuine threats and minimizing operational overhead. This aligns with best practices for data protection and regulatory compliance, as it demonstrates a proactive and diligent effort to safeguard sensitive data effectively. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a blanket increase in detection sensitivity across all policies without a thorough analysis of existing incidents and false positives is a flawed approach. This will inevitably lead to a significant surge in alerts, overwhelming the incident response team, and increasing the likelihood of critical incidents being missed due to alert fatigue. This demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and a failure to understand the practical implications of system configuration, potentially leading to a breach of due diligence in data protection. Disabling or significantly reducing the scope of certain detection policies based on anecdotal evidence of false positives, without a structured analysis or understanding of the data types being protected, is also professionally unacceptable. This approach risks creating blind spots in the system's coverage, leaving sensitive data vulnerable to exfiltration. It represents a failure to uphold the organization's responsibility to protect data as mandated by regulatory frameworks, potentially resulting in significant compliance violations and reputational damage. Focusing solely on technical tuning of detection rules without considering the associated incident response workflows is an incomplete optimization strategy. While accurate detection is crucial, inefficient or poorly defined response procedures can negate the benefits of improved detection. This can lead to delays in addressing genuine incidents, increasing the risk of data loss and noncompliance. It signifies a failure to adopt a holistic approach to data loss prevention, which is essential for effective risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with optimizing DLP systems should adopt a structured, analytical, and iterative approach. This involves 1. Understanding the regulatory and business context. Identify the specific data types that require protection and the relevant compliance obligations. 2. Baseline analysis. Establish a clear understanding of the current DLP system's performance, including alert volume, false positive rates, and incident resolution times. 3. Data-driven tuning. Use incident data and false positive analysis to identify areas for improvement in detection rules. This may involve adjusting sensitivity, refining criteria, or implementing more advanced detection methods. 4. Workflow optimization. Review and refine incident response procedures to ensure efficiency, clarity, and compliance. 5. Continuous monitoring and validation. Regularly review system performance and adjust configurations as needed to maintain optimal effectiveness. This systematic process ensures that optimization efforts are targeted, effective, and aligned with both technical capabilities and regulatory requirements, demonstrating a commitment to robust data protection. Question 5. The analysis reveals that a Symantec Data Loss Prevention 12 administrator has identified a low-severity incident where a user has inadvertently shared a document containing non-critical customer contact information via an unapproved channel. The DLP policy is configured to flag such events. Considering the need to maintain operational efficiency and adhere to data protection principles, what is the most appropriate initial course of action for the administrator? Option A. Ignore the incident as it is classified as low severity and involves non-critical data. Option B. Immediately escalate the incident to the security team for full investigation and potential disciplinary action. Option C. Conduct a brief investigation to gather more context about the document's content and the user's intent before deciding on further action. Option D. Manually review every document shared by the user to ensure no other policy violations have occurred. The correct answer is B. Immediately escalate the incident to the security team for full investigation and potential disciplinary action. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention, DLP, administration, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the operational realities and potential impact on business processes. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the Symantec Data Loss Prevention, DLP, 12 framework, specifically concerning incident response, within the context of an unspecified but implied regulatory environment that prioritizes data protection and privacy. The administrator must make a judgment call on how to handle a potentially sensitive but non-critical incident, considering the risk of overreporting versus the risk of underreporting and missing a genuine threat. The pressure to maintain system efficiency while ensuring compliance adds to the complexity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a nuanced understanding of the Symantec DLP-12 incident management workflow and its alignment with regulatory expectations for data protection. Best professional practice dictates a tiered response based on the severity and potential impact of the incident. This means initially investigating the incident to gather more context before escalating or taking drastic action. This approach aligns with principles of proportionality and due diligence, ensuring that resources are used effectively and that legitimate business activities are not unduly disrupted. It also reflects a commitment to a systematic and evidence-based response, which is often a requirement in regulatory frameworks that mandate a risk-based approach to data security. By performing a thorough investigation, the administrator can accurately assess the risk, determine the appropriate remediation steps, and document the process for audit and compliance purposes. This demonstrates a mature and responsible approach to DLP administration. Incorrect approaches analysis, automatically escalating every minor policy violation without further investigation, is professionally unacceptable due to several regulatory and ethical failures. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to apply a risk-based approach, which is often implicitly or explicitly required by data protection regulations. This approach can lead to alert fatigue, where genuine critical incidents are overlooked amidst a flood of false positives. It also risks alienating users and disrupting legitimate business operations, potentially leading to complaints and undermining trust in the DLP system. Ethically, it can be seen as an overreach of monitoring capabilities without sufficient justification. Ignoring the incident entirely because it appears minor is also professionally unacceptable. This failure directly contravenes the purpose of implementing a DLP solution, which is to detect and prevent data loss. Many regulatory frameworks impose a duty of care to protect sensitive data, and ignoring a potential breach, however small it may seem initially, can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions if the data is subsequently compromised. It represents a dereliction of duty and a failure to uphold the organization's commitment to data security and privacy. Manually reviewing every single alert for potential policy violations, regardless of the system's automated classification, is inefficient and unsustainable. While thoroughness is important, this approach is not scalable and can lead to significant delays in addressing actual threats. It also suggests a lack of confidence in the DLP system's configuration and effectiveness, which is a failure in system administration. From a regulatory perspective, while manual review might seem diligent, the lack of a systematic and efficient process can be problematic if it leads to missed incidents or delays in response. Professional reasoning. Professionals in DLP administration should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes a risk-based and proportionate response. This involves 1. Understanding the organization's data classification policies and the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the data being protected. 2. Configuring the DLP system to accurately detect and classify potential incidents based on defined policies and risk levels. 3. Establishing clear incident response workflows that differentiate between minor policy violations, potential threats, and confirmed breaches. 4. Empowering administrators to investigate and triage incidents, gathering sufficient context to make informed decisions about escalation and remediation. 5. Regularly reviewing and refining DLP policies and incident response procedures to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory landscapes. 6. Maintaining comprehensive audit trails of all DLP activities, including incident investigation and resolution, to demonstrate compliance. Question 6. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly concerned about sophisticated data exfiltration methods. When implementing Symantec data loss prevention 12 within a U.S. regulatory environment, which administrative approach best balances the need for robust data protection with operational efficiency and employee privacy? Option A. Configure broad, generic policies that apply the same level of monitoring and restriction to all data and user groups, regardless of specific risk profiles. Option B. Focus exclusively on blocking outbound email traffic, as this is identified as the primary vector for data loss in industry reports. Option C. Implement a phased approach, starting with detection-only policies to identify potential incidents and false positives, followed by gradual refinement and enforcement based on observed data. Option D. Immediately deploy strict blocking policies across all communication channels and data types to prevent any potential data leakage. The correct answer is D. Immediately deploy strict blocking policies across all communication channels and data types to prevent any potential data leakage. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention, DLP, Administration, balancing the need for comprehensive monitoring with the privacy expectations of employees and the potential for overblocking legitimate business communications. The challenge lies in configuring DLP policies that are effective against actual data exfiltration risks without creating undue friction or hindering productivity. The Symantec Data Loss Prevention 12 framework, when applied within a U.S. regulatory context, requires careful consideration of how policies impact employee data and the potential for unintended consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation and continuous refinement of DLP policies, starting with a broad detection mode and gradually moving to blocking. This aligns with best professional practices by 1. Minimizing initial disruption, allowing the system to learn and identify false positives before enforcing restrictions prevents legitimate business activities from being halted. 2. Data-driven policy tuning. Gathering data on detected incidents provides concrete evidence for refining policy rules, ensuring they are targeted and effective. 3. Stakeholder buy-in. Demonstrating the effectiveness of policies through observed data before implementing strict enforcement builds trust and facilitates acceptance among employees and management. 4. Regulatory compliance, U.S. context. While specific U.S. regulations like HIPAA or GLBA might dictate certain data protection requirements, the administration of DLP tools must also consider general principles of employee privacy and the need for proportionate measures. A phased approach helps ensure that the implemented controls are necessary and not overly intrusive, which can be a factor in legal and ethical considerations regarding employee monitoring. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing strict blocking policies immediately without prior detection and tuning is professionally unacceptable due to 1. Regulatory/ethical failures. This approach risks violating employee privacy expectations without sufficient justification. In the U.S., while employers have rights to monitor, overly broad or poorly configured blocking can lead to claims of unreasonable surveillance or interference with protected activities. It also fails to adhere to the principle of proportionality, where the severity of the control should match the identified risk. 2. Lack of efficacy. Without understanding the typical data flows and potential false positives, immediate blocking will likely lead to significant disruption of legitimate business operations, causing productivity loss and frustration. This undermines the primary goal of DLP, which is to protect sensitive data while enabling business. 3. Inadequate risk assessment. This approach bypasses the crucial step of assessing actual data exfiltration risks within the organization. It assumes a high level of threat across all data types and communication channels, which is rarely the case and leads to inefficient resource allocation. Focusing solely on a single, broad policy without considering the context of different data types or departments is professionally unsound because 1. Regulatory/ethical failures. Different data types e.g., PI, financial data, intellectual property, have varying levels of sensitivity and are subject to different regulatory requirements. A one-size-fits-all approach fails to address these nuances, potentially leading to underprotection of highly sensitive data or overprotection of less critical information. This can result in non-compliance with specific data protection mandates. 2. Inefficient resource management. Applying the same level of scrutiny and restriction to all data types is inefficient. It can lead to unnecessary alerts and blocking for low-risk data, diverting attention from genuine threats to high-risk data. Ignoring employee feedback and concerns about policy impact is professionally detrimental because 1. Regulatory/ethical failures. While not always a direct regulatory violation, ignoring employee feedback can create an environment of distrust and lead to indirect compliance issues. Employees who feel unfairly monitored or hindered may inadvertently bypass security controls or engage in risky behavior. In some contexts, failure to consider the impact on employee rights can have legal ramifications. 2. Reduced effectiveness. Employees are often on the front lines of business operations and can provide valuable insights into how DLP policies affect their work. Ignoring their feedback means missing opportunities to identify and address practical issues that could render policies ineffective or lead to workarounds that compromise security. Professional reasoning. Professionals administering Symantec Data Loss Prevention 12 should adopt a risk-based iterative approach. This involves 1. Understanding the regulatory landscape. Identify all applicable U.S. regulations, e.g., HIPAA, GLBA, CCPA, state-specific privacy laws that govern the types of data the organization handles. 2. Conducting a thorough data discovery and classification. Understand what sensitive data exists, where it resides, and how it flows within the organization. 3. Developing context-aware policies. Create DLP policies that are tailored to specific data types, business processes, and user groups. 4. Phased implementation. Begin with detection-only modes to gather data and identify false positives. 5. Continuous monitoring and tuning. Regularly review DLP incident reports, analyze trends, and refine policies to improve accuracy and reduce false positives. 6. Gradual enforcement. Once policies are well-tuned and validated, gradually move to blocking or other enforcement actions for high-risk incidents. 7. Stakeholder communication. Maintain open communication with IT, legal, compliance, and business units, as well as employees, to ensure transparency and address concerns. Question 7. Process analysis reveals that an organization is implementing Symantec Data Loss Prevention 12 to protect sensitive customer information. The administration team is considering different strategies for deploying monitoring policies. Which approach best balances regulatory compliance, operational efficiency, and employee privacy considerations? Option A. Prioritize the implementation of automated blocking for all file types and network protocols, assuming that any transfer of data outside the organization's control is a potential breach. Option B. Configure Symantec DLP-12 to monitor all employee activities and data access without specific policy definitions, relying on the system's default threat intelligence to identify potential risks. Option C. Deploy comprehensive monitoring policies across all communication channels and file storage locations, immediately blocking any detected sensitive data transfers to external destinations. Option D. Begin by implementing targeted monitoring policies for the most critical and regulated data types, such as personally identifiable information, PI, and financial data, with an initial focus on detection and alerting, followed by a phased rollout of blocking rules based on incident review and risk assessment. The correct answer is C. Deploy comprehensive monitoring policies across all communication channels and file storage locations, immediately blocking any detected sensitive data transfers to external destinations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention, DLP, administration, balancing the need for comprehensive monitoring with the privacy expectations of employees and the legal obligations of the organization. The challenge lies in identifying sensitive data without creating an overly intrusive surveillance environment, which can lead to employee distrust, morale issues, and potential legal repercussions if not handled correctly. The administrator must navigate the technical capabilities of Symantec DLP-12 with the specific regulatory landscape governing data privacy and employee monitoring within the defined jurisdiction. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation that prioritizes critical data types and leverages Symantec DLP's capabilities for targeted monitoring. This aligns with best practices for data governance and regulatory compliance. By first focusing on highly sensitive data categories, e.g., personally identifiable information, PI, protected health information, FI, or financial data, depending on the jurisdiction's specific regulations, and then expanding based on risk assessment and policy evolution, the organization demonstrates a responsible and proportionate approach to data protection. This method minimizes the initial impact on employee privacy while addressing the most significant risks. It also allows for iterative refinement of policies based on real-world findings and feedback, ensuring ongoing compliance and effectiveness. This approach is ethically sound, as it respects employee privacy by not engaging in broad, indiscriminate surveillance and legally defensible as it is, driven by a clear risk-based strategy, aligned with regulatory requirements. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing broad, unrestricted monitoring of all employee communications and file activities without a clear, risk-based justification is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach violates privacy expectations and could contravene data protection laws that mandate proportionality and necessity in data collection. It creates an environment of distrust and can lead to legal challenges if employees can demonstrate that their data was collected without a legitimate business need or proper consent. Focusing solely on technical alerts without a defined policy framework or a clear understanding of what constitutes a data breach or policy violation is also problematic. This leads to alert fatigue, where genuine incidents may be missed, and can result in inconsistent enforcement. It fails to provide a clear directive on what data is protected and why, making it difficult to justify monitoring activities to employees or regulators. Ignoring the potential for false positives and implementing automated blocking or remediation without human review can lead to operational disruptions and unintended consequences. This can hinder legitimate business processes and may result in the loss of critical business data if the DLP system incorrectly identifies it as sensitive. It also fails to account for the nuances of data usage and context, which are crucial for accurate risk assessment and policy enforcement. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, phased approach to DLP implementation. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory requirements of the jurisdiction concerning data privacy, employee monitoring, and sensitive data types. 2. Conducting a thorough data discovery and classification exercise to identify where sensitive data resides and how it is used. 3. Developing clear, well-defined DLP policies that are aligned with regulatory obligations and business needs, focusing initially on high-risk data. 4. Implementing Symantec DLP-12 in a phased manner, starting with monitoring and alerting for critical data types, and gradually expanding based on risk assessment and policy effectiveness. 5. Establishing a process for reviewing and responding to DLP incidents, including mechanisms for handling false positives and ensuring human oversight where appropriate. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating DLP policies and configurations to adapt to evolving threats, regulatory changes, and business requirements. 7. Communicating DLP policies and their purpose to employees in a transparent manner to foster trust and understanding. Question 8. During the evaluation of Symantec Data Loss Prevention 12 policy configurations, an administrator is tasked with ensuring compliance with data privacy regulations while minimizing the impact on business operations. The organization handles various types of sensitive data across multiple departments, which approach best balances effective data protection with operational efficiency and regulatory adherence. Option A. Implement granular DLP policies that target specific sensitive data types with contextual rules, conduct a pilot deployment in a representative department, and establish a continuous monitoring and refinement process based on performance metrics and regulatory updates. Option B. Disable DLP monitoring for departments deemed less critical or those handling less sensitive data to reduce administrative overhead and avoid potential false positives. Option C. Configure broad DLP policies to capture all potential sensitive data across the organization to ensure no data is missed, regardless of departmental function or specific regulatory requirement. Option D. Utilize the default DLP policy templates provided by Symantec without any customization, assuming they meet all organizational and regulatory needs. The correct answer is A. Implement granular DLP policies that target specific sensitive data types with contextual rules, conduct a pilot deployment in a representative department, and establish a continuous monitoring and refinement process based on performance metrics and regulatory updates. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention administration, balancing the need for comprehensive monitoring with the potential for overcollection and privacy concerns. The administrator must decide how to configure DLP policies to effectively detect sensitive data while minimizing the risk of capturing irrelevant or overly personal information. This requires a nuanced understanding of both the technical capabilities of Symantec DLP and the regulatory landscape governing data privacy. The challenge lies in making a decision that is both technically sound and legally compliant, avoiding potential fines and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation and continuous refinement of DLP policies. This begins with a clear understanding of the specific sensitive data types that need protection, as defined by relevant regulations. The administrator should then configure DLP policies to target these specific data types with appropriate sensitivity levels and contextual rules. Crucially, this approach emphasizes a pilot phase and ongoing monitoring to assess the effectiveness of the policies and identify any false positives or negatives. Regular review and adjustment based on real-world performance and evolving regulatory requirements represent best professional practice. This aligns with the principle of data minimization, a cornerstone of many data privacy regulations, which mandates collecting and processing only the data that is necessary for a specific purpose. It also reflects a proactive and adaptive approach to security and compliance, rather than a reactive one. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing overly broad policies that capture all sensitive data types without granular context is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach violates the principle of data minimization and can lead to the unnecessary collection and storage of personal data, increasing the risk of a data breach and potential noncompliance with privacy laws. It also creates an administrative burden and can lead to a high volume of false positives, diminishing the effectiveness of the DLP system. Disabling DLP monitoring for certain departments or data types without a thorough risk assessment and documented justification is another critical failure. This creates blind spots in the organization's data protection strategy, leaving sensitive information vulnerable. It can be interpreted as negligence and a failure to uphold the organization's duty of care in protecting data, potentially leading to severe regulatory penalties if a breach occurs in those unmonitored areas. Relying solely on default DLP policy configurations without customization or validation is also professionally unacceptable. Default settings may not adequately address the specific risks and regulatory obligations of the organization. This can result in either insufficient protection or overblocking, both of which are detrimental. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to tailor security measures to the unique environment and compliance needs of the organization. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, iterative approach to DLP policy management. This involves 1. Understanding the regulatory landscape and identifying specific data protection obligations. 2. Defining clear objectives for DLP implementation, focusing on protecting critical sensitive data. 3. Configuring policies with precision, utilizing context and sensitivity levels to minimize false positives and negatives. 4. Implementing policies in a phased manner, starting with pilot groups and gradually expanding. 5. Continuously monitoring, analyzing, and refining policies based on performance data and evolving threats and regulations. 6. Maintaining thorough documentation of all policy decisions, configurations, and review processes. Question 9. Research into the capabilities of Symantec Data Loss Prevention 12 reveals its ability to monitor email content for specific keywords and patterns. An administrator is tasked with configuring DLP to detect and flag potential intellectual property theft. The administrator is aware that this could involve monitoring internal employee communications, which may contain personal information. The administrator has not yet received explicit authorization or a clearly defined policy for this level of monitoring. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Implement broad monitoring of all internal email communications for keywords related to intellectual property, assuming this is a necessary security measure. Option B. Immediately configure DLP to monitor internal email communications for intellectual property-related keywords and patterns, and then seek retrospective policy approval. Option C. Focus solely on external email communications for intellectual property-related keywords, as internal monitoring raises too many privacy concerns. Option D. Halt the implementation of email monitoring until a clear, documented policy is established, and explicit authorization is obtained from relevant stakeholders, ensuring the scope of monitoring is defined and legally compliant. The correct answer is A. Implement broad monitoring of all internal email communications for keywords related to intellectual property, assuming this is a necessary security measure. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between an organization's desire to protect sensitive data and the potential for overreach in monitoring employee communications. The administrator must navigate the technical capabilities of Symantec Data Loss Prevention, DLP-12, while adhering to the ethical and legal boundaries of employee privacy. The core of the challenge lies in balancing security imperatives with individual rights, requiring careful judgment to avoid both underprotection of data and undue surveillance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency and adherence to established organizational policies and legal frameworks. By seeking explicit authorization and ensuring that monitoring is narrowly tailored to legitimate business needs and legal compliance, the administrator upholds ethical standards and avoids potential legal repercussions. This approach aligns with principles of data privacy and responsible technology deployment, ensuring that DLP is used as a tool for protection, not as a means of intrusive surveillance. An incorrect approach that involves implementing broad, indiscriminate monitoring without clear policy or justification would represent a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Such an action could violate employee privacy rights, potentially contravening data protection regulations that mandate lawful and proportionate processing of personal data. It could also lead to a breach of trust within the organization, fostering a climate of suspicion and negatively impacting employee morale. Furthermore, it exposes the organization to legal challenges and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring potential policy violations or legal risks due to a desire to avoid conflict or workload, is also professionally unacceptable. This inaction can lead to undetected data breaches, regulatory fines, and a failure to uphold the organization's duty of care. It demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the responsibilities associated with managing sensitive data and security systems. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multifaceted approach. First, thoroughly understand the organization's data protection policies, acceptable use policies, and relevant legal and regulatory obligations. Second, assess the specific risks and the capabilities of the DLP system to address those risks. Third, engage with relevant stakeholders, including legal counsel, HR, and management, to ensure that any proposed monitoring is authorized, proportionate, and clearly communicated. Finally, document all decisions, justifications, and implementation details to maintain accountability and provide a clear audit trail. Question 10. The evaluation methodology shows that a new Symantec data loss prevention policy is being considered to protect sensitive customer financial data. Which approach to assessing the potential impact of this new policy on business operations and data security best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for data protection? Option A. Rely exclusively on automated scanning tools to identify all potential impacts without any manual review or contextual analysis. Option B. Conduct a phased impact assessment, starting with a broad review of data flows and systems, followed by a focused deep dive into high-risk areas, incorporating data sampling and user feedback. Option C. Perform a brief, high-level assessment that only considers the most obvious data types and systems, assuming other areas are not at significant risk. Option D. Deploy the DLP policy immediately across all relevant systems to observe its real-time effects and address issues as they arise. The correct answer is B. Conduct a phased impact assessment, starting with a broad review of data flows and systems, followed by a focused deep dive into high-risk areas, incorporating data sampling and user feedback. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in determining the most effective method for assessing the impact of a new Symantec data loss prevention (DLP) policy. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive risk identification with the practical constraints of implementation and the potential for disruption. A hasty or incomplete impact assessment can lead to misidentified risks, ineffective policy controls, and potential regulatory noncompliance. Conversely, an overly burdensome assessment can delay critical security enhancements. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both thorough and efficient. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased impact assessment that begins with a broad review of data flows and systems likely to be affected by the new DLP policy. This initial phase identifies key data types, user groups, and business processes. Subsequently, a more focused deep dive is conducted on high-risk areas, involving targeted data sampling, user interviews, and system log analysis. This iterative process allows for the refinement of the policy and the identification of specific technical and operational controls needed. This represents best professional practice because it aligns with a risk-based approach to data protection, which is a cornerstone of many regulatory frameworks. By prioritizing high-risk areas, resources are used efficiently, and the likelihood of overlooking critical vulnerabilities is minimized. This methodology ensures that the DLP policy is implemented in a way that effectively mitigates the most significant risks while minimizing disruption to legitimate business operations, thereby supporting compliance with data protection principles. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately deploy the DLP policy across all systems without a prior impact assessment. This fails to account for potential unintended consequences, such as blocking legitimate business communications or impacting system performance. This approach represents a significant regulatory failure, as it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding how the policy will affect data handling and potentially violates principles of proportionality and necessity in data protection regulations. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on automated scanning tools to identify all potential impacts without any human oversight or contextual understanding. While automated tools are valuable, they may not grasp the nuances of business processes or the sensitivity of data in specific contexts. This can lead to an overestimation or underestimation of risks, resulting in either an overly restrictive policy or one that fails to adequately protect sensitive information. This approach is ethically problematic as it abdicates professional responsibility for risk assessment and can lead to decisions that are not aligned with the organization's actual risk appetite or regulatory obligations. A third incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial assessment that only considers the most obvious data types and systems, neglecting less apparent but potentially critical areas. This can lead to blind spots in the DLP strategy, leaving sensitive data vulnerable. This represents a failure to uphold professional standards of thoroughness and diligence, potentially exposing the organization to regulatory penalties for inadequate data protection measures. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-based approach to impact assessment. This involves 1. Understanding the objective of the DLP policy and the data it aims to protect. 2. Identifying all relevant systems, data repositories, and user groups that the policy might affect. 3. Conducting an initial broad assessment to categorize potential impacts. 4. Performing a deeper, targeted assessment of high-risk areas, utilizing a combination of automated tools and manual analysis. 5. Documenting all findings, assumptions, and recommendations. 6. Iteratively refining the policy and implementation plan based on the assessment results. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, risks are adequately addressed, and compliance objectives are met effectively. Question 11. Regulatory review indicates a need to enhance data loss prevention capabilities to ensure compliance with financial data protection mandates. The organization handles a significant volume of customer financial information across various departments and storage locations, including email, file shares, and cloud storage. The Symantec Data Loss Prevention (DLP) 12 system is in place, which approach to impact assessment and policy implementation is most appropriate to ensure regulatory adherence and operational efficiency. Option A. Prioritize the implementation of DLP policies based on the volume of data, without a specific assessment of its regulatory sensitivity, to reduce the overall data footprint being monitored. Option B. Immediately deploy broad, default DLP policies provided by the vendor across all monitored channels, assuming these will cover the majority of financial data protection requirements. Option C. Focus solely on implementing technical monitoring capabilities for all data types, regardless of their regulatory classification, to ensure maximum visibility. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive data discovery and classification exercise to identify all instances of sensitive financial data, followed by a phased implementation of DLP policies targeting these identified data types and locations, prioritizing those with the highest regulatory impact. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive data discovery and classification exercise to identify all instances of sensitive financial data, followed by a phased implementation of DLP policies targeting these identified data types and locations, prioritizing those with the highest regulatory impact. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention, DLP, administration, balancing the need for comprehensive monitoring with the potential for overcollection and privacy concerns. The challenge lies in identifying sensitive data that poses the highest risk of regulatory noncompliance without creating an unmanageable volume of alerts or infringing on employee privacy. The Symantec data loss prevention (DLP) system's effectiveness hinges on accurately identifying and protecting sensitive data, making the initial impact assessment critical. Misjudging the scope or type of data to monitor can lead to significant resource waste, missed threats, or regulatory penalties. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased, risk-based strategy that prioritizes the identification and protection of data most likely to be subject to regulatory requirements. This aligns with the principle of proportionality in data protection, focusing resources on areas of highest risk. By starting with a targeted assessment of data types and locations that are explicitly mentioned in relevant regulations, e.g., PI, financial data, health information, administrators can establish a baseline for monitoring. This approach ensures that the DLP system is configured to address the most critical compliance obligations first, minimizing the risk of immediate regulatory violations. It also allows for iterative refinement of policies as understanding of data flows and risks evolves, preventing the system from becoming overly broad or ineffective. This is best professional practice because it demonstrates due diligence in addressing regulatory mandates and a responsible approach to data privacy. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a broad, indiscriminate monitoring policy across all data types and locations without prior assessment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks overcollection of personal data, potentially violating privacy regulations by capturing information that is not necessary for compliance or security purposes. It also leads to alert fatigue, where the sheer volume of low-priority alerts can obscure genuine threats, undermining the effectiveness of the DLP system and increasing the likelihood of missing critical incidents. Furthermore, it can create an environment of distrust and surveillance among employees, impacting morale and productivity. Focusing solely on technical feasibility without considering regulatory requirements is another failure. While a system might be capable of monitoring vast amounts of data, this does not equate to compliance. Regulations often dictate what data needs protection and why, not just how it can be monitored. Ignoring these dictates means the DLP implementation may not address the actual compliance risks, leaving the organization exposed. Finally, relying solely on vendor default policies without a specific impact assessment is professionally negligent. Vendor defaults are generic and may not align with the specific regulatory landscape or the organization's unique data handling practices and risk profile. This can lead to either insufficient protection for critical data or unnecessary monitoring of non-sensitive information, both of which are suboptimal and potentially non-compliant. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic, risk-driven approach to DLP impact assessment. This involves 1. Understanding the relevant regulatory landscape. Identify all applicable data protection laws and industry-specific regulations. 2. Data discovery and classification. Map where sensitive data resides and classify it according to its regulatory significance and risk level. 3. Prioritization. Focus initial DLP policy implementation on the highest risk data types and locations that are most critical for compliance. 4. Phased deployment and testing. Roll out policies incrementally, test their effectiveness, and refine them based on results and evolving threats. 5. Continuous monitoring and review. Regularly review DLP alerts, policy effectiveness, and regulatory changes to ensure ongoing compliance and system optimization. This structured approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively, compliance obligations are met, and privacy is respected. Question 12. The monitoring system demonstrates a sudden and sustained surge in policy violations related to the unauthorized transmission of personally identifiable information, PI, to external entities. Which of the following approaches best addresses the immediate impact assessment of this situation to ensure regulatory compliance and minimize business disruption? Option A. Focus solely on identifying the technical source of the policy violations and implementing immediate technical blocks on all external PII transmissions to prevent further data leakage. Option B. Conduct a high-level review of the policy configuration to determine if the violations are due to misconfiguration rather than actual data leakage. Option C. Document the number of policy violations and await further instructions from the legal department before taking any action. Option D. Immediately initiate a comprehensive review of all data flows involving PII, categorizing the violations by the specific PII elements exposed, the affected individuals or customer segments, the potential regulatory frameworks implicated, e.g., data privacy laws, and the potential business and reputational damage. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate a comprehensive review of all data flows involving PII, categorizing the violations by the specific PII elements exposed, the affected individuals or customer segments, the potential regulatory frameworks implicated, e.g., data privacy laws, and the potential business and reputational damage. Explanation: the monitoring system demonstrates a significant increase in policy violations related to the transmission of sensitive customer financial data. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a rapid and accurate assessment of the impact of these violations on regulatory compliance, business operations, and customer trust, all while adhering to the strict requirements of the Symantec Data Loss Prevention 12 Administration Framework. The urgency of the situation necessitates a structured approach to determine the scope and severity of the issue before implementing remediation. The correct approach involves a systematic impact assessment that prioritizes identifying the specific data types involved, the affected customer segments, the potential financial and reputational damage, and the relevant regulatory obligations, e.g., data privacy laws, financial industry regulations. This approach represents best professional practice because it ensures that remediation efforts are targeted, efficient, and aligned with legal and business priorities. By understanding the full scope of the impact, administrators can justify the resources needed for remediation, communicate effectively with stakeholders, and demonstrate due diligence in protecting sensitive information, thereby mitigating regulatory penalties and maintaining customer confidence. An incorrect approach would be to immediately block all outbound financial data transmissions without a thorough assessment. This would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure by potentially disrupting legitimate business operations, impacting customer service, and causing undue business hardship. It fails to consider the nuances of data classification and legitimate business needs, leading to an overreaction that is not proportionate to the identified risks. Another incorrect approach is to only focus on the technical aspects of the violations, such as the number of policy matches, without considering the business and regulatory context. This would be a failure to understand the why behind the violations and their potential consequences. It neglects the critical need to assess the impact on data privacy, customer rights, and potential legal liabilities, which are central to data loss prevention and regulatory compliance. A third incorrect approach is to delay the impact assessment until a formal audit is initiated. This demonstrates a reactive rather than proactive stance, which is a significant ethical and professional failing. It risks allowing the situation to escalate, potentially leading to more severe regulatory scrutiny, fines, and reputational damage. Best professional practice demands immediate action upon detection of significant policy violations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear framework. 1. Immediate triage. Acknowledge and log the detected violations. 2. Scope definition. Determine the extent of the violations, e.g., time frame, affected systems, data types. 3. Impact analysis. Assess the potential consequences across business, legal, regulatory, and reputational domains. 4. Prioritization. Rank the identified risks based on severity and likelihood. 5. Remediation planning. Develop and implement targeted solutions. 6. Communication. Inform relevant stakeholders. 7. Verification. Confirm the effectiveness of remediation. Question 13. Governance review demonstrates a critical need to implement a new Symantec data loss prevention policy to prevent the exfiltration of sensitive customer financial data. The proposed policy is designed to detect and block specific transaction patterns. Given the potential for this policy to impact legitimate financial operations, what is the most prudent approach to ensure its effectiveness and minimize disruption? Option A. Implement the policy only on systems known to have minimal data flow to gauge its technical performance without risking significant operational impact. Option B. Conduct a pilot deployment of the new policy on a limited set of non-critical financial transaction systems and a representative sample of financial operations users for a defined period, gathering feedback and performance data before a full rollout. Option C. Focus exclusively on tuning the policy to achieve zero false positives in a test environment, assuming that a technically perfect policy will inherently have minimal operational impact. Option D. Deploy the new policy immediately across all financial transaction systems and user endpoints to ensure comprehensive protection against the identified threat. The correct answer is D. Deploy the new policy immediately across all financial transaction systems and user endpoints to ensure comprehensive protection against the identified threat. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention, DLP, administration, balancing the need for comprehensive monitoring with the potential for overblocking and impacting legitimate business operations. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the impact of a new policy before full deployment, ensuring it effectively addresses the identified risk without causing undue disruption. This requires a nuanced understanding of the data being protected, the business processes that handle it, and the potential consequences of both under- and over-enforcement. Professional judgment is critical to avoid both security gaps and operational paralysis. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout and targeted testing of the new DLP policy. This is best professional practice because it allows for real-world validation of the policy's effectiveness and impact in a controlled manner. By initially deploying the policy to a limited, representative group of users or systems, administrators can observe its behavior, identify any false positives or negatives, and gather feedback. This iterative process, often referred to as a pilot program or staged deployment, directly aligns with the principle of minimizing risk during system changes. It allows for adjustments to be made based on empirical data before a full-scale implementation, thereby safeguarding both data security and operational continuity. This approach is implicitly supported by best practices in IT change management and risk mitigation, which emphasize validation and controlled deployment. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the policy immediately across the entire organization without prior testing is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a disregard for the potential disruption to business operations and could lead to the accidental blocking of critical communications or data transfers, potentially impacting compliance with other business-related regulations or contractual obligations. This approach prioritizes speed over thoroughness, increasing the risk of unintended consequences. Deploying the policy only to a small, non-representative group of users, such as a single department known for low data handling volume, is also professionally unacceptable. While it involves some level of testing, it fails to provide a realistic assessment of the policy's impact across the broader organization. The risk of false positives or negatives in different business units or with varying data types remains largely unaddressed, leaving the organization vulnerable to both security breaches and operational disruptions. This approach is insufficient for a comprehensive impact assessment. Focusing solely on technical performance metrics without considering user impact or business process implications is another failure. While technical performance is important, DLP policies are designed to protect data within the context of business operations. Ignoring how the policy affects users' ability to perform their jobs or how it interacts with existing workflows means the impact assessment is incomplete. This can lead to a policy that is technically sound but practically unworkable, ultimately undermining its intended purpose and potentially leading to workarounds that circumvent security controls. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach DLP policy implementation with a risk-based, iterative methodology. The decision-making process should begin with a clear understanding of the data at risk and the specific threats being addressed. This should be followed by a thorough impact assessment that considers technical feasibility, operational implications, and potential user disruption. A phased rollout, starting with a pilot program on a representative subset of the environment, is crucial for validating the policy's effectiveness and identifying any unintended consequences. Feedback mechanisms should be established to gather input from pilot users. Based on the results of the pilot, the policy should be refined before a broader deployment. This structured approach ensures that DLP solutions are both effective in protecting sensitive data and integrated seamlessly into the organization's operational landscape, thereby meeting regulatory requirements and ethical obligations. Question 14. Implementation of Symantec Data Loss Prevention 12 requires a careful approach to minimize disruption and ensure effectiveness, Which of the following strategies best balances technical deployment with operational continuity and regulatory adherence? Option A. A phased rollout beginning with a pilot program in a representative business unit, followed by iterative policy refinement and broader deployment based on lessons learned. Option B. Implementation without consulting or involving end users or department heads to avoid influencing the technical setup. Option C. A complete, simultaneous deployment across all departments to achieve immediate, organization-wide protection. Option D. Deployment solely based on vendor-provided default configurations without internal validation or customization. The correct answer is A. A phased rollout beginning with a pilot program in a representative business unit, followed by iterative policy refinement and broader deployment based on lessons learned. Explanation. Scenario analysis. Implementing a new Symantec data loss prevention (DLP) solution, particularly one as comprehensive as version 12, necessitates a thorough impact assessment. This is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the technical deployment with the potential disruption to existing business processes, user workflows, and the organization's overall data handling posture. Failure to adequately assess the impact can lead to unforeseen operational issues, user resistance, compliance gaps, and ultimately, a compromised DLP strategy. The assessment must consider not just the technical aspects of deployment, but also the human and procedural elements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout strategy, beginning with a pilot program in a controlled environment. This allows for the identification and remediation of unforeseen technical issues, policy misconfigurations, and user training needs before a full-scale deployment. It aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation. From a regulatory perspective, a phased approach demonstrates due diligence in ensuring the DLP solution functions as intended and does not inadvertently create new compliance risks or hinder legitimate business operations, which is crucial for maintaining adherence to data protection regulations. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of widespread disruption and ensures that the DLP system is effective and integrated smoothly. Incorrect approaches analysis. A big bang deployment without prior testing or a pilot program is professionally unacceptable. It represents a high-risk strategy that can lead to significant operational downtime, widespread user frustration, and potential data breaches if the system is not configured correctly from the outset. This approach fails to demonstrate due diligence and could be viewed as negligent from a compliance standpoint, as it prioritizes speed over assurance. Deploying the DLP solution without involving key stakeholders from different business units is also professionally unsound. This oversight can lead to policies that are either too restrictive, hindering productivity, or too permissive, failing to adequately protect sensitive data. It ignores the critical need for business context in policy creation and enforcement, potentially leading to compliance failures and operational inefficiencies. Implementing the DLP solution solely based on vendor recommendations without internal validation or customization is another flawed approach. While vendor guidance is valuable, it may not fully account for the unique data flows, regulatory obligations, and risk appetite of the specific organization. This can result in a system that is either over-engineered or underprotected, leading to both compliance risks and operational burdens. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach the implementation of a DLP solution by first establishing clear objectives aligned with business needs and regulatory requirements. This is followed by a comprehensive impact assessment that includes technical, operational, and human factors. A phased rollout, starting with a pilot, is the preferred method for risk mitigation and validation. Continuous engagement with stakeholders, iterative policy refinement, and robust training programs are essential for successful adoption and ongoing effectiveness. This structured, risk-aware methodology ensures that the DLP solution not only meets technical requirements, but also supports business objectives and maintains regulatory compliance. Question 15. Cost-benefit analysis shows that the current Symantec data loss prevention system is generating an unmanageable volume of false positive alerts, consuming significant security team resources and hindering legitimate business operations. The organization needs to address this issue effectively without compromising its data protection posture. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate and professionally responsible approach to resolving this challenge? Option A. Increase the alert threshold for all DLP policies to filter out a significant portion of the current alert traffic, assuming most are benign. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of DLP policies and detection rules, collaborating with business units to understand data context and refine configurations based on legitimate use cases, followed by a phased implementation of adjustments and continuous monitoring. Option C. Continue with the current manual triage process for all alerts, allocating additional personnel to manage the workload, and deferring any policy tuning until a later, undefined date. Option D. Immediately disable the DLP policies that are generating the highest volume of false positives to alleviate the immediate alert burden on the security team. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of DLP policies and detection rules, collaborating with business units to understand data context and refine configurations based on legitimate use cases, followed by a phased implementation of adjustments and continuous monitoring. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention, DLP, administration, balancing robust security with operational efficiency and user productivity. The organization is facing a significant increase in false positive alerts from the Symantec DLP system, leading to a substantial drain on the security team's resources and impacting legitimate business processes. The core challenge lies in identifying the root cause of these false positives and implementing effective remediation strategies without compromising the overall DLP posture or introducing new risks. The pressure to reduce alert volume while maintaining compliance with relevant regulations, assuming U.S. jurisdiction for this exam context, such as HIPAA for healthcare data or SOX for financial data, which Symantec DLP is often used to protect, adds a layer of complexity. A hasty or incomplete solution could lead to either a resurgence of false positives or, worse, a missed genuine data breach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation into the root causes of the false positives. This includes a thorough review of the DLP policies, the detection mechanisms, e.g., regular expressions, keyword dictionaries, exact data matching, and the specific data types being monitored. It requires collaboration with business units to understand the context of the flagged data and to refine policy rules based on legitimate business use cases. Implementing a phased approach to policy tuning, starting with less critical rules and monitoring the impact, is crucial. This methodology aligns with best practices for DLP administration, emphasizing continuous improvement and adaptation to the organization's evolving data landscape. It also implicitly supports regulatory compliance by ensuring that DLP controls are effective and appropriately configured to protect sensitive data as mandated by U.S. regulations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling specific DLP policies or detection methods without a thorough understanding of the data they are intended to protect is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach bypasses the intended security controls, creating a blind spot that could allow sensitive data to be exfiltrated or misused, leading to violations of data privacy laws and industry-specific regulations. It represents a failure to uphold the organization's responsibility to protect sensitive information. Simply increasing the alert threshold without investigating the underlying causes is another flawed approach. While it might reduce the immediate volume of alerts, it does not address the root problem of misconfigured or overly sensitive policies. This can lead to a false sense of security, as genuine incidents might be masked by the higher threshold, resulting in a failure to detect and respond to actual data breaches, which is a direct contravention of regulatory requirements for data protection and incident response. Ignoring the false positive issue and continuing with the current resource-intensive alert triage process is also professionally unacceptable. This approach demonstrates a lack of proactive problem-solving and an inability to optimize security operations. It leads to inefficient use of valuable security personnel, potentially increasing the risk of burnout and reducing the team's capacity to address more critical security threats. Furthermore, it fails to adapt the DLP system to the organization's actual data handling practices, which can indirectly impact compliance by making the DLP program less effective and sustainable. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this situation by first acknowledging the impact of the false positives on both security operations and business functions. The decision-making process should involve 1. Data gathering and analysis. Collect detailed logs and metrics on the false positive alerts, categorizing them by policy, detection method, and business unit. 2. Root cause identification. Conduct a deep dive into the identified patterns to pinpoint the specific rules, configurations, or data characteristics causing the false positives. This may involve working with data owners and subject matter experts. 3. Policy refinement and testing. Develop and test proposed changes to DLP policies in a controlled environment. This could involve adjusting keywords, refining regular expressions, or implementing more specific conditions. 4. Phased implementation and monitoring. Roll out policy changes incrementally, closely monitoring the impact on alert volume, false positives, and true positives. 5. Documentation and communication. Maintain thorough documentation of all changes and communicate effectively with stakeholders regarding the adjustments and their rationale. This systematic approach ensures that security controls are optimized, regulatory compliance is maintained, and operational efficiency is improved. Question 16. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of alerts indicating the unauthorized transmission of sensitive customer financial data via email to external recipients. These alerts are being generated by Symantec data loss prevention (DLP) policies designed to protect this specific data type. The DLP administrator is tasked with responding to these alerts. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory compliance for managing these DLP alerts? Option A. Implement a policy that automatically quarantines all emails containing sensitive customer financial data for manual review by a supervisor, without direct user notification or immediate blocking. Option B. Investigate each alert to understand the context, user intent, and data involved, and then engage with affected users for education and potential policy refinement, escalating serious violations as necessary. Option C. Archive all alerts without taking any immediate action, assuming they are likely false positives or minor infractions that do not warrant operational disruption. Option D. Immediately configure the DLP system to block all outbound emails containing sensitive customer financial data to external recipients without further investigation. The correct answer is D. Immediately configure the DLP system to block all outbound emails containing sensitive customer financial data to external recipients without further investigation. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a recurring pattern of policy violations related to the transmission of sensitive customer financial data outside of approved secure channels. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the organization's need to protect sensitive data with the operational requirements of employees who may inadvertently or intentionally violate policy. The Symantec data loss prevention (DLP) system is configured to detect and alert on these violations, but the effectiveness of the response hinges on the administrator's understanding of the underlying policies and the appropriate actions to take. The correct approach involves a multifaceted response that prioritizes investigation, policy refinement, and user education, all within the framework of the relevant regulatory landscape. This represents best professional practice because it addresses the root cause of the violations, minimizes the risk of future incidents, and ensures compliance with data protection regulations. Specifically, it involves 1. Thorough investigation of the alerts to understand the context and intent behind the data transmission. This includes examining the source, destination, type of data, and frequency of violations. 2. Reviewing and potentially refining the DLP policies to ensure they are accurate, effective, and do not create undue operational burdens. Overly restrictive policies can lead to legitimate business activities being flagged, while overly permissive policies fail to protect data. 3. Engaging with the affected users or departments to understand their workflows and provide targeted training on data handling procedures and the importance of DLP policies. 4. Escalating confirmed malicious or negligent violations to the appropriate internal security or legal teams for further disciplinary action, if necessary, in accordance with company policy and legal requirements. An incorrect approach would be to immediately block all transmissions of sensitive financial data without investigation. This is professionally unacceptable because it could cripple essential business operations, leading to significant financial losses and customer dissatisfaction. It also fails to address the underlying reasons for the violations, meaning the problem will likely persist. Furthermore, it may violate principles of proportionality and due process if users are penalized without a fair investigation. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the alerts, assuming they are false positives or not significant enough to warrant attention. This is a critical regulatory and ethical failure. Ignoring DLP alerts means the organization is not actively protecting sensitive customer financial data, which directly contravenes data protection regulations that mandate reasonable security measures. It also exposes the organization to significant legal liabilities, reputational damage, and potential fines in the event of a data breach. A third incorrect approach is to solely rely on automated blocking of all flag transmissions, without any human oversight or investigation. While automation is crucial for efficiency, a complete lack of human judgment can lead to blocking legitimate business communications, causing operational disruptions. It also bypasses the opportunity to understand user behavior, identify policy gaps, or provide necessary user education, which are vital components of a comprehensive data loss prevention strategy. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a risk-based approach. This means prioritizing actions based on the severity and potential impact of the DLP alerts. It requires a deep understanding of the organization's data assets, the regulatory environment, and the operational context. Professionals should always strive for a balance between security and usability, employing a strategy that is both effective in preventing data loss and practical for business operations. This involves continuous monitoring, regular policy review, proactive user engagement, and a clear escalation path for confirmed incidents. Question 17. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a specific Symantec data loss prevention 12 policy, designed to prevent the unauthorized export of sensitive financial reports, incurs significant operational overhead and has a low rate of actual policy violations detected. The analysis suggests that disabling this policy could lead to substantial cost savings in terms of system resources and administrative time. However, the potential risk of a data breach involving these reports remains a concern. What is the most prudent course of action for the DLP administrator? Option A. Implement a pilot program to test a revised, less resource-intensive version of the policy on a subset of users, while continuing to monitor for any policy violations and gathering user feedback before a full rollout or complete deactivation. Option B. Immediately disable the policy to realize the projected cost savings, as the cost-benefit analysis indicates a low return on investment for its current configuration. Option C. Implement the policy changes suggested by the cost-benefit analysis without further testing or consultation, assuming the projected savings outweigh any minor potential risks. Option D. Escalate the findings to senior management for a decision on whether to maintain or disable the policy, without conducting any further technical evaluation or risk assessment. The correct answer is A. Implement a pilot program to test a revised, less resource-intensive version of the policy on a subset of users, while continuing to monitor for any policy violations and gathering user feedback before a full rollout or complete deactivation. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention, DLP, administration, balancing robust security with operational efficiency and user productivity. The professional challenge lies in interpreting the findings of a cost-benefit analysis, which, while indicating potential savings, also highlights risks. A critical judgment is required to determine the appropriate course of action without compromising regulatory compliance or introducing unacceptable security vulnerabilities. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, risk-based evaluation before implementing significant changes to a DLP policy. This aligns with the principles of responsible data stewardship and regulatory adherence. By conducting a pilot program and engaging stakeholders, the administrator ensures that the proposed policy adjustments are not only cost-effective, but also practical, compliant, and minimally disruptive. This proactive and measured approach minimizes the risk of unintended consequences, such as data breaches or regulatory penalties, which could far outweigh any initial cost savings. An incorrect approach that involves immediately disabling the DLP policy based solely on the cost-benefit analysis's projected savings is professionally unacceptable. This action would represent a significant regulatory failure, as it bypasses established security protocols without adequate risk assessment. It demonstrates a disregard for the potential for data exfiltration or accidental disclosure, which could violate regulations such as those pertaining to personally identifiable information, PI, or sensitive corporate data. Ethically, it prioritizes short-term financial gains over the fundamental responsibility to protect data and maintain confidentiality. Another incorrect approach, which is to implement the policy changes without any further testing or stakeholder consultation, also carries significant regulatory and ethical risks. While the cost-benefit analysis might suggest efficiency gains, the lack of a pilot or user feedback loop means potential operational disruptions or unforeseen loopholes in the new policy could go unnoticed. This could lead to a situation where data is inadvertently exposed or compliance controls are weakened, creating a regulatory liability. Ethically, it fails to consider the impact on users and the organization's overall security posture. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. First, thoroughly understand the cost-benefit analysis, identifying both the potential benefits and the associated risks. Second, evaluate these risks against the organization's regulatory obligations and internal policies. Third, consider a phased implementation or pilot program to test the proposed changes in a controlled environment. Fourth, engage relevant stakeholders, including IT security, legal compliance, and affected business units, to gather feedback and ensure buy-in. Finally, document all decisions, justifications, and risk mitigation strategies to demonstrate due diligence and compliance. Question 18. Investigation of a Symantec data loss prevention alert indicating the transmission of financial account numbers via an unencrypted email to an external vendor. The alert was triggered by a policy designed to protect personally identifiable information, PI, and financial data. The administrator needs to determine the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with relevant U.S. financial data protection regulations. Option A. Delete the incident record from the Symantec DLP system to avoid unnecessary reporting and potential scrutiny. Option B. Immediately disable the PII and financial data detection policy, assuming it is overly sensitive and causing false positives, to prevent future disruptions to email communications. Option C. Block all outbound emails containing any form of financial data, regardless of the recipient or context, to err on the side of caution. Option D. Review the specific DLP incident details, including the exact financial data identified, the sender and recipient, and the content of the email. Cross-reference this information with applicable U.S. financial regulations, e.g., GLBA, PCI DSS if applicable, to ascertain if a violation has occurred and what remediation is required. The correct answer is D. Review the specific DLP incident details, including the exact financial data identified, the sender and recipient, and the content of the email. Cross-reference this information with applicable U.S. financial regulations e.g., GLBA, PCI DSS if applicable, to ascertain if a violation has occurred and what remediation is required. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention administration, balancing proactive security measures with the potential for overblocking legitimate business communications. The administrator must interpret the nuances of Symantec DLP policies and their interaction with specific regulatory requirements to ensure compliance without hindering operational efficiency. The challenge lies in accurately identifying and categorizing sensitive data, understanding the context of its transmission, and applying appropriate remediation actions that align with legal and organizational mandates. The need for a deep understanding of both the technical capabilities of DLP and the specific regulatory landscape is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Symantec DLP incident logs, focusing on the specific policy that triggered the alert. This includes examining the exact data identified as sensitive, the source and destination of the communication, and any contextual information available within the DLP system. The administrator must then cross-reference this information with the relevant regulatory framework, in this case, implied U.S. regulations for a U.S.-based exam context, to determine if the data classification and the communication method violate any legal obligations. For example, if the data involved protected health information, FI, and was transmitted via an unencrypted email to an unauthorized recipient, this would clearly violate HIPAA. The remediation action should then be tailored to address the specific violation, such as blocking the email, quarantining the data, and initiating a formal investigation or user retraining. This approach ensures that actions are data-driven, compliant, and proportionate to the risk. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately assume a policy misconfiguration and disable the rule without further investigation. This fails to acknowledge the potential for a genuine data breach or regulatory violation. It bypasses the critical step of verifying the incident against legal requirements, potentially leaving the organization exposed to significant penalties and reputational damage. This approach is ethically and regulatorily unsound, as it prioritizes convenience over due diligence and compliance. Another incorrect approach is to simply delete the incident from the logs without understanding the root cause. This is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. It constitutes an attempt to conceal a potential violation, which can lead to severe legal repercussions, including fines and criminal charges, if discovered during an audit or investigation. It undermines the integrity of the DLP system and the organization's commitment to data protection. A third incorrect approach is to apply a blanket remediation action, such as blocking all outbound emails containing any form of sensitive data, without considering the context or the specific regulatory requirements. While seemingly cautious, this can lead to significant business disruption and is often not aligned with the proportionality required by regulations. For instance, certain types of sensitive data might be permissible to share internally with authorized personnel under specific conditions, and a blanket block would be an overreach, potentially violating business needs and not reflecting a nuanced understanding of compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic, evidence-based approach to DLP incident investigation. This involves 1. Understanding the alert and its context within the DLP system. 2. Identifying the specific data and communication channel involved. 3. Consulting the relevant regulatory framework to assess compliance. 4. Determining the appropriate remediation action based on the severity of the violation and legal requirements. 5. Documenting all findings and actions taken for audit and future reference. This process ensures accountability, promotes continuous improvement of DLP policies, and upholds the organization's commitment to data security and regulatory compliance. Question 19. What factors determine the most appropriate configuration of Symantec data loss prevention policies for monitoring sensitive data within an organization operating under U.S. federal regulations, specifically considering the balance between comprehensive data protection and the minimization of unnecessary data collection? Option A. The specific U.S. federal regulations applicable to the types of sensitive data handled by the organization, the defined scope of data access for different user roles, and the identified high-risk data exfiltration channels. Option B. The personal preference of the IT security manager regarding the level of employee monitoring, without explicit reference to specific regulatory mandates or identified data risks. Option C. The default policy templates provided by Symantec, assuming they offer universal compliance across all U.S. federal regulatory frameworks without requiring customization. Option D. The maximum processing power available on the Symantec DLP servers and the total volume of data processed across the network, regardless of data sensitivity or regulatory requirements. Correct answer is A. The specific U.S. federal regulations applicable to the types of sensitive data handled by the organization, the defined scope of data access for different user roles, and the identified high-risk data exfiltration channels. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention administration, balancing the need for comprehensive monitoring with the potential for overcollection and privacy concerns, all within the strict confines of regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying Symantec data loss prevention (DLP) policies in a way that aligns with the specific regulatory framework governing the organization's operations, without overstepping legal boundaries or creating an environment of undue surveillance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen monitoring approach is both effective in preventing data loss and legally defensible. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a granular, context-aware application of DLP policies. By focusing on specific data types and user roles, and by implementing policies that are directly tied to regulatory requirements, e.g., HIPAA for health information, PCI DSS for payment card data. The administrator ensures that monitoring is targeted and proportionate. This approach minimizes the risk of unnecessary data collection, reduces the potential for false positives, and demonstrates a commitment to compliance with relevant regulations. It also allows for more efficient resource allocation and easier auditing. An incorrect approach that involves broadly enabling all monitoring features without specific justification fails to adhere to the principle of data minimization, which is often a cornerstone of data privacy regulations. This can lead to the collection of sensitive personal information that is not necessary for DLP purposes, thereby increasing the organization's risk profile and potentially violating privacy laws. Another incorrect approach, which relies solely on technical capabilities without considering the regulatory landscape, risks implementing policies that are either insufficient to meet compliance obligations or overly restrictive, impacting employee productivity and morale without a clear legal basis. Finally, an approach that ignores the need for regular policy review and updates leaves the organization vulnerable to evolving threats and changing regulatory requirements, making it a passive rather than proactive compliance strategy. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework. This involves identifying specific data types that are subject to protection, understanding the permissible uses and disclosures of that data, and recognizing any restrictions on monitoring or data collection. Next, the administrator should assess the organization's specific risks and the types of data loss incidents that are most likely to occur. This risk assessment should then inform the configuration of DLP policies, ensuring that they are tailored to address these risks within the legal and ethical boundaries. Regular review and validation of policies against both the threat landscape and regulatory updates are crucial for maintaining an effective and compliant DLP program. Question 20. When evaluating the most effective strategy for detecting and preventing the exfiltration of sensitive customer data within Symantec Data Loss Prevention 12, which approach best balances accuracy, efficiency, and regulatory compliance? Option A. A layered approach combining content analysis, keyword matching, regular expressions, exact data matching, with endpoint monitoring to detect data movement and access. Option B. Utilizing only endpoint monitoring to track file transfers and USB device activity without inspecting the content of the data. Option C. Solely implementing keyword matching to identify sensitive terms within documents and communications. Option D. Relying exclusively on exact data matching, EDM, for all sensitive data types, assuming perfect predefinition of all sensitive data patterns. The correct answer is A. A layered approach combining content analysis, keyword matching, regular expressions, exact data matching, with endpoint monitoring to detect data movement and access. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data loss prevention, DLP, administration, balancing the need for comprehensive monitoring with the potential for over-alerting and impacting legitimate business operations. The administrator must interpret Symantec DLP-12 detection capabilities in the context of specific regulatory requirements, which are not explicitly stated, but are implied by the need for DLP. The challenge lies in selecting the most effective detection method without compromising accuracy or efficiency, and without violating any implicit compliance mandates. The administrator must consider the nuances of data types, the sensitivity of the information, and the potential for false positives, all while ensuring that the chosen method aligns with the organization's risk appetite and any applicable data protection laws. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a layered strategy that leverages multiple detection methods tailored to the specific data being protected. This aligns with best practices in data security and compliance. By combining content analysis, keyword matching, regular expressions, exact data matching, with endpoint monitoring, file access, USB device usage, the administrator creates a robust defense. Content analysis is crucial for identifying sensitive data based on its intrinsic characteristics, while endpoint monitoring provides context and detects exfiltration attempts. This multifaceted approach minimizes the risk of missing actual data breaches, while also reducing the likelihood of excessive false positives, thereby ensuring compliance with data protection regulations that mandate reasonable security measures. This layered approach is professionally sound as it demonstrates due diligence in protecting sensitive information. Incorrect approach is analysis. Relying solely on keyword matching is insufficient because it often generates a high volume of false positives and can miss data that doesn't contain specific keywords but is still sensitive, e.g., PII in a free text field. This approach fails to meet the standard of reasonable care required by many data protection regulations, as it is prone to both underdetection and over-alerting, leading to potential compliance gaps. Implementing only endpoint monitoring without content analysis is also problematic. While it can detect data movement, it cannot identify the type of data being moved. This means an administrator might be alerted to the transfer of any file, regardless of its sensitivity, leading to alert fatigue and a failure to identify actual data breaches of regulated information. This lack of data classification is a significant regulatory failure. Using only exact data matching, EDM, is too restrictive for many scenarios. EDM is highly accurate but requires predefined exact matches. It would miss variations in sensitive data, such as slightly altered PII or financial information, rendering it ineffective against sophisticated threats or common data entry variations. This limited scope can lead to a false sense of security and a failure to comply with regulations requiring protection of all forms of sensitive data. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach DLP configuration by first understanding the specific data types and regulatory obligations relevant to their organization. This involves a risk assessment to identify critical data assets and the potential impact of their compromise. Subsequently, they should evaluate Symantec DLP's detection capabilities, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each method. A layered approach, combining methods that address different aspects of data identification and exfiltration, is generally the most effective. Regular review and tuning of DLP policies are essential to adapt to evolving threats and business processes, ensuring ongoing compliance and operational efficiency. This iterative process of assessment, implementation, and refinement is key to professional data loss prevention administration.